I know, it's kind of cliche at this point, but if there's one thing that absolutely terrifies me, it's the ocean. I mean, basically everything about it. The fact that it can go as deep as Mount Everest in some places, the fact that you could get stranded alone for hundreds of miles away from civilization with no way of escaping, the fact that beneath the surface is complete blackness, but most of all for me, it's the fear of the unknown. The fact that the bottom of the ocean is one of the last unexplored places on Earth, with new species being discovered all the time that we previously didn't know about, or were just mere myth and rumor. Honestly, the ocean feels like it's a completely different planet in a way from land on Earth. It's so alien and mysterious compared to everything else, it's kinda like space. Although unlike space, there are most definitely creatures down there that we know next to nothing about. We have some incredibly creepy images and descriptions of some beings seen down there, but sometimes that's all we have to go on. And maybe, just maybe, some of those ocean anomalies that we hear about in stories and myths that we think can't possibly be true, maybe have some truth to them after all. But to be clear, on this iceberg today, it's not just strictly mysteries here. There are also just some generally interesting phenomena, known weird creatures, ocean-related phobias, and other topics. But anyway, today I thought we'd take a look at this iceberg dedicated to the weirdest the ocean has to offer. From the most well-known mythological creatures to the most horrifying and mystifying scientific discoveries and enigmas. Today, we're taking a look at the Ocean Mysteries Iceberg. Tip of the iceberg. More than 80% of the ocean is unexplored. Here's an unsettling fact right out of the gate, but I guess an exciting one for those that are interested in exploring its depths, although you can leave me out of that group. But anyways, yeah, since Earth consists of about 70% water, it makes sense that a lot of the ocean is unexplored, but that 80% figure did shock me when I first saw it. I mean, we kind of gave up on fully exploring the ocean, at least for now, considering how deep it is. And I mean, obviously not completely, some people dedicate their entire lives to it, but I just mean it's fascinating that we are much more invested in exploring space at this point in comparison. Like, it's actually easier to get people onto the moon than it is to get humans to the very bottom of the ocean. At least it seems that way. Of course, exploring the ocean has its own unique challenges and limitations, but this fact also just makes it all the more mysterious and interesting. Atlantis. I'm sure you've all heard of the lost underwater city of Atlantis, which actually is a mythical location dating back to ancient Greece, where stories and myths were told of a naval empire and island known as Atlantis that ruled over most of the world at some point, before eventually, like many other real and fictional civilizations, fell to ruin, falling to the very depths of the Atlantic Ocean, which is where that legend about it being a secret underwater city probably comes from. And for some time, people considered that such a civilization could have actually existed, and many tried to prove its existence. However, the story of Atlantis is most likely just an allegory, a tale as old as time, of an unattainable utopian society that, as all known civilizations do, was eventually destroyed. Some people still think though that it could exist and point to strange looking objects found in the ocean, such as what look like roads and even remnants of buildings, but over time it also seems like this myth has evolved, as most do, going from being a powerful island nation that was ruined and literally sank to the bottom of the ocean, to being a utopian society of godlike fish people living down there, away from the rest of the world. Either way, it's still one of the most fascinating and oldest mythological locations on Earth. Kraken. Probably the most well-known ocean cryptid, well, alongside another one which will appear a little later on, but I'm sure you've all heard of it. The Kraken is a legendary sea monster, and a giant octopus in most interpretations, with sightings and tales of the creature dating all the way back to the early 1700s in Norway, from explorers and fishermen, and then spreading to more European countries. And then basically everywhere, becoming one of the most well-known sea monster myths, because, well, not only does it sound really cool, but this time there is actually a little bit more substance to the legend. However, the way the Kraken is described is most likely too big to have existed, as it is depicted destroying and overtaking huge, massive ships. However, these sightings could be attributed to giant squids, which can be very large and are quite intimidating, getting to sometimes 50 feet long. However, I'm sure a lot of these stories were probably exaggerated, as that's what tends to happen, and then as the legend gets passed down, details become crazier and crazier, you know how it goes. So now you've got stories of the Kraken fighting other sea monsters and taking down and sinking whole ships. Mermaids. Here we have another very well-known mythical ocean and sea creature, featured basically all over the world in the folklore of many different cultures, all with a fairly similar description of typically a woman with a lower body of a fish with a tail. There were also said to be mermen as well, but those aren't as common. Anyway, this myth likely also originated from ancient Greece because of a similar creature called the siren, but typically mermaid sightings were said to take place at sea for obvious reasons, and would usually happen at some sort of disastrous event, such as a shipwreck or a storm, and were even said to lure away men at sea with their beauty and then drown them. Although in other versions of the myth, they were said to be kind creatures that would help humans out at sea. They were also said to be great singers, likely coming from the original siren creatures from Greek mythology. They're also very popular because they've been featured in quite a lot of artworks and literature over the years, and despite a few claimed notable sightings in the modern day, this one is a lot less prominent than the more modern ocean cryptids nowadays. Still, it is interesting that this one got to basically everywhere in the world, from South America to African, European, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and even Indian folklore. Bermuda Triangle. One of the most infamous locations in the ocean, also known as the Devil's Triangle. This is a large region in the North Atlantic Sea that is said to be cursed, as those who travel in it a lot of the time disappear mysteriously, never to be seen again, with there being quite a few notable instances of this occurring. Interestingly enough, affecting both ships and aircraft, with a few notable flights disappearing off the face of the earth as well. So then, why does this happen? Is it something paranormal? Is this triangle region actually cursed? Well, probably not. The best explanation we have today is because of compass failure due to there being some kind of magnetic disturbance in the area which could cause them to point in the wrong direction, as well as simply because there is notoriously bad weather in that area of the Atlantic, known for having violent storms and hurricanes which could easily take out a ship, and actually has been known to happen. Also, apparently the amount of disappearances in the area, contrary to popular belief, isn't that much greater than other places in the ocean. In fact, it isn't even one of the most dangerous regions according to a study done in 2013, so the whole legend is likely just exaggerated. Megalodon. Here we've got another legendary sea creature, but one that did actually exist millions of years ago. An extinct giant species of shark called the megalodon, known as one of the largest ocean predators at the time that it was around. And although there are some remains which have been found, it isn't certain how big this shark really could get. They were thought to be, however, in the ballpark of around 14 to 20 meters long, or about 47 to 67 feet, which is absolutely insane, possibly even weighing up to 60 tons. To put this all into perspective, this is the megalodon compared to a standard great white shark, and this is the size of one of its teeth. Just crazy to think that something like this actually existed. Thalassophobia. This refers to the fear of deep water, such as in lakes, the sea, and the ocean. Yeah, count me in that group for sure. Honestly though, is this really a phobia or just something baked into human evolution? Because I don't think I know a single person who would want to be down in the pitch black ocean, but I know they do exist, otherwise we wouldn't have deep sea divers, but still, I don't think I could imagine anything more terrifying or uncomfortable. Not being able to see 2 feet in front of you, knowing you could very easily drown to death, relying on equipment that if it fails, you're going to suffer a very painful and prolonged death, where no one can save you. Now, this really refers to the intense debilitating fear, which is what phobias really are, and I get that, but I'd still be willing to say that most people are afraid of the deep ocean. Old sea monsters. And to finish off this first tier, we have a more general one about just some old sea monster legends, and there are quite a few. Of course, you've got the Kraken and the Leviathan from the Bible, which we'll get into a little later on in the Iceberg. But there's also some other really interesting ones like the sea serpent, the sea pig, which is kind of funny, giant lobsters also, basically just huge versions of any sea or ocean creature for that matter. A lot of these are even featured on old ocean maps, and some of these are just wild. Like, imagine, there's no way of actually knowing what's in the ocean because it's unexplored at this point, and you see this thing on a map. Like, who's going sailing after that? This thing looks like a boss from Dark Souls. Shallow waters. Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Now, this one is less of a mystery by my understanding and more so just a kind of sad reality of the ocean, because there are a few of these garbage patches that exist. This one refers to the Pacific Trash Vortex, which exists in two main patches in the west and the east, which, as it sounds, they're just collections of trash and debris that have accumulated over time. However, it's not like a big island of just garbage as it kind of sounds like, it's more so just a bunch of microplastics gathered in multiple locations. However, apparently the extent of this garbage patch is unknown, which might be where the mystery comes in because most of the trash sinks to the ocean floor, leaving only about 20 to 30% on the surface. And since it's so far from any real civilization and coast, efforts to clean it up haven't gone very far as of yet. Green flash. So a green flash is actually more so just a phenomenon that can be seen during sunset or sunrise and doesn't necessarily take place in the ocean. However, it is usually most observed over some kind of horizon such as the ocean. Strangely enough though, this small yet distinct green light can usually only be seen over the horizon for a few seconds before it's gone, which is said to happen because Earth's atmosphere can cause the light shining down from the sun to refract temporarily into different colors. Don't ask me how this works, but yeah, kind of a cool thing. Loch Ness Monster. Here is the other most well-known water cryptid on this list, having been a part of Scottish folklore for thousands of years and still having alleged sightings to this day. The first known reported sighting was actually way back in the year 565, which described a water beast similar to the one in the known legend today. However, it wasn't until 1933 to 1934 that the myth would become extremely well known, with this infamous photograph being taken of the supposed creature. Although this photo, simply called the surgeon's photograph, has been investigated and is since considered a hoax, but since the 30s there have been many more pieces of video and photo evidence of said creature, said to inhabit the Loch Ness region of Scotland, but is sometimes reported to be found in other bodies of water. Still, even after all this time, there is no solid evidence of its existence. It's also understandable and likely that a lot of these sightings were of other misidentified animals and objects, such as eels, catfish, sharks, or even boat wakes, which is one of the more prominent theories. Milky Sea Phenomenon. Here we have another really interesting phenomenon, one that can be found in the ocean where large sections of the seawater will start to glow, which is more easily visible at night. However, apparently it wasn't until 2005 that photographic evidence was actually acquired of this phenomenon, despite there being hundreds of reports of this since the early 1900s. It is believed though that this is caused by a bioluminescent bacteria found in the water that actually emits this blue-looking light. Bloop. This is quite the infamous ocean mystery, referring to a certain strange sound captured in 1997 by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, somewhere in the South Pacific Ocean. Here is the sound at 16 times speed. So what caused this low frequency, high amplitude sound? Some believed it could have been made by some sort of underwater creature, although experts had trouble pinpointing which one would have made this sound, unless it was something that they had never seen or heard before. Analysis of the sound by some claimed that it was consistent with a living creature. However, the sound was detected by sensors that were almost 3,000 miles apart. So what could make such a loud noise? Only something even bigger than the largest known ocean animals. Other theories were made as to what the sound could be, such as an ice quake, which seems like the most likely explanation, given that they can be so loud that their amplitude can be detected over 3,000 miles away. But for now, this one remains a creepy yet fascinating ocean mystery. Titanic. The infamous Titanic. I'm sure I don't have to go into this one too much. Everyone has heard of the tragedy that took place on April 15th, 1912. The deadliest single ship sinking in history at the time, where more than 1,500 people died that day, as the ship had over 2,000 people on board and was the largest known ship at the time. And unfortunately, and also kind of ironically, the ship hit a huge iceberg which caused damage to the hull and allowed water to leak in, and eventually made the whole thing capsize and sink. Tsunami. Another kind of basic one here, but still definitely an all-time fear of mine. Like, imagine just seeing the biggest wave you've ever seen coming right towards you. No time to get away, unable to outrun this massive wall of water. It's truly the stuff of nightmares, but these are very real, and the footage of these hitting shores are just terrifying. Not only that, but they usually come in a series of waves, and are caused by a number of different factors, with some even being man-made due to explosions and other trigger factors. Some are also caused by volcanic eruptions or landslides, but a lot of them come as a result of earthquakes, and can even reach heights of 100 feet. But for some reason in 1958, the largest tsunami ever recorded reached a staggering height of 1,700 feet off the coast of Alaska. And sadly, many people in coastal areas have been killed or had their cities and towns completely destroyed by these waves. One of the deadliest natural disasters in history, in fact, was the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, which killed over 200,000 people in 14 different countries. So yeah, tsunamis are no joke. And knowing more about this definitely doesn't make me want to move to a coastal town anytime soon. Body of the iceberg. Osborne Reef. This is a very strange one. The Osborne Reef is a man-made artificial reef created in 1974 off the coast of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, using old discarded tires. Now, I don't know anything about how marine life works, but to me this already screams bad idea, although hindsight is of course 20/20, but yeah, surprise surprise, it did more harm than good. Because instead of promoting more organisms to attach to the reef, it caused an environmental disaster, as the tires would not stay in place and would wash up on shores and further polluted the waters. Although cleanup efforts did begin in the early 2000s, including using military training exercises as part of the cleanup efforts, and as of 2019, about a third of the 2 million tires have been removed. Lake of Despair. So I think this is actually referring to a specific brine pool, which is an underwater lake found at the bottom of the ocean. Yeah, you heard that right. And there's one located in the Gulf of Mexico called the Jacuzzi of Despair, which is quite the ominous title, but it's for good reason. It was formed over millions of years and contains deadly gases, very salty water, and high water temperatures. Well, for being 3,000 feet below sea level, that is, with it being almost 67 degrees Fahrenheit, which doesn't seem that hot, but is typically deadly for the marine life that enters its waters. Kaz 2. The story of Kaz 2 is one of the most interesting maritime mysteries that I've ever come across. On April 20th, 2007, an abandoned yacht was found off the coast of Australia called Kaz 2. However, no one was aboard the ship, and the 3-man crew was actually missing, never to be seen again. They were Derek Batten, Peter Tunstead, and James Tunstead, all mostly inexperienced sailors. However, what's strange is the condition the boat was found in, as it seemed as though it was in perfectly working order, and not only that, but the engine was still on, the GPS system and radio were fully functional, and there was even food set out, as well as a laptop which was still on. However, it was missing a life raft, and one of the boat's sails was shredded, and despite a widespread search for the 3 men, they were never found, despite it seeming as though they went overboard at some point in their voyage. Eerily enough, footage was even captured on the first day of their expedition, and is the last known sighting of the men before they disappeared, which was recorded on April 15th by James Tunstead. Even still, it's uncertain what happened to these men and how they were removed from the vessel, but many continue to speculate and look for answers to this day. Submechanophobia. This is quite an interesting phobia. Basically, it's the fear of man-made objects found deep underwater, whether that be a shipwreck, a statue, or any other type of ruined structure. This is a rarer type of water phobia that may be associated with the simple fear of the unknown, but for the most part, it's uncertain what causes this fear, although it's thought that it could have something to do with the human mind struggling with the idea of a foreign human-made object being found in an otherwise natural environment. Rogue waves. Similar to tsunamis, but different in the fact that these waves can come at unpredictable times and typically aren't due to other factors like earthquakes, which is the case with tsunamis. And these rogue waves, or freak waves as they're called, are a big issue and danger when it comes to ships in the ocean. Mary Celeste. Another infamous maritime mystery case, this time from all the way back in the 1800s, concerning a merchant ship called the Mary Celeste, which was found in the Atlantic Ocean adrift and abandoned on December 4th, 1872. The ship was deserted and damaged when it was discovered, with the last entry in the entry log dating November 25th, 9 days earlier, and was recorded as being about 400 miles from where it was found. Strangely, there were no signs of a great struggle, no signs of violence or a fire, and a lot of provisions were in fact still on board, although the ship had taken on some water and the rigging was damaged. But most importantly, the lifeboat was missing. What happened to those on board, where they went, or what possibly made them flee remains unknown, although there are many theories and myths surrounding this event. Some believe they encountered some sort of natural weather phenomenon that made them evacuate the ship to the lifeboat, or possibly even gave them the false impression that the ship was sinking, which might have caused a panic and a quick escape, or possibly something forced them out, whether that also be from the weather and the ocean itself, or if foul play was involved, which some believe to actually be the case. Possibly from pirates trying to steal the contents of the ship, although this doesn't seem likely, or possibly someone was trying to destroy the ship for some kind of insurance fraud scam. And there are also many fictional accounts and retellings of what might have happened, which muddies the waters with this case, including an early work of Arthur Conan Doyle, the man who wrote the Sherlock Holmes stories. Eels.
Ha! Escalators!
Eels.
Not really a mystery here, rather just some of the weirdest creatures that can be found in the ocean, typically in shallow waters, and are known for being nocturnal for the most part. And there are many different species of these fish out there, over 800 in fact. But since a lot of the deepest depths of the ocean remain unexplored, maybe there's even more strange eel species that have yet to be seen by human eyes. Deep waters. Giant oarfish. Speaking of weird fish species, we have the giant oarfish, which is considered the world's largest type of bony fish, and may possibly be what some people spot when they think they see a sea serpent, as these things can get up to 26 feet long, and possibly even longer. That's just the biggest one that's been positively identified. But yeah, not too much else to say, definitely an interesting fish. HMS Daedalus Sea Serpent. Yeah, so here we have one of those sightings of an alleged sea serpent, which also may in fact just have been a really long giant oarfish, but this sighting was from way back in August of 1848, from crew aboard the HMS Daedalus, a warship of the Royal British Navy. It was reported as being over 60 feet long and moving very fast in the water, but as we learned, oarfish don't typically get that long, so maybe this was something else, or like a lot of other accounts of ocean creatures, it's hard to really tell how big they are, and of course it could have been exaggerated, which, let's be honest, that also happens a lot. But it's also been posited by a biologist that what they saw that day might not have been a giant oarfish at all, or even a sea serpent, but rather a sei whale, which is one of the largest kinds of whales in the ocean, and can reach over 60 feet long, just like this supposed sea serpent. Blue whale mating ritual. Yeah, so this is on here. Again, not really a mystery here as far as I know, just a weird fact about blue whales, which have a very complex mating ritual apparently. Maybe the mystery is why they do all of this in the first place. Basically though, they just roll around on each other for a bit, then dive deep into the ocean, then suddenly fly upwards into the surface, and that's when they do the thing. Yeah. Purple orb. During a Nautilus Live expedition in the Channel Islands, an interesting object was found, a mysterious purple orb, and the video of this from this angle doesn't even really look real. It looks like a video game item. Even the researchers in the video were having fun with it.
No.
Come on,
Yeah,
buddy.
I'm almost never referred
What
to
if
a
it's an
crab.
So what is this thing? Well, upon sampling it, scientists believe it to be a pleurobranch, which is a kind of sea slug. Bioshock vibes, anyone? Did we just discover Adam for the first time? No, but seriously, knowing this thing is a living creature that even excretes poison and can even change its shape, yeah, I think I'll stay away from these. They can also even be many different colors, but they aren't normally purple, so this could be the discovery of a brand new species. Baltic Sea Anomaly. This refers to a strange anomaly found in a sonar image taken by a diving team in the Baltic Sea in 2011, which created a lot of speculation as to what it could be, with some thinking it could be a sunken UFO, or possibly remnants of a destroyed ancient civilization. However, experts have concluded that it is simply a natural geographic formation. Brine pools. So we already kind of talked about this with the Lake of Despair, which is a brine pool, so I won't go into this one too much, but yes, the basic concept is that it's an underwater lake inside of an ocean, which is formed by high concentrations of salt and other gases, which become so thick that it doesn't even merge with the rest of the water, creating a distinct body of water. But that was a huge oversimplification, and I'm no expert on this, but either way, these brine lakes are very deadly to most organisms that come in contact with them, and mostly only support the life of very specific microbes. Devil's Sea. The Devil's Sea, also known as the Devil's Triangle, is another region in the Atlantic Ocean that is known for its mysterious disappearances, just like the Bermuda Triangle, which I believe the Devil's Sea is actually a part of. It's just that this is more so the Japanese version of the legend, although the words used to describe it are ma no umi, which are used to describe various different dangerous locations in the ocean, so it's a little confusing, but mainly this refers to that same specific region in the Pacific. And there are many reports of strange occurrences and disappearances, such as one pilot during World War II who radioed that the sky was, quote, opening up, which provides quite an ominous image. However, most experts believe nothing paranormal is actually happening here, and that most of this stuff can just be explained away by a combination of environmental factors. Mariana Trench. The Mariana Trench is one of the most mysterious places on Earth, being that it is the deepest known trench in the ocean. Just to put into perspective how deep it goes, it's deeper than Mount Everest, the highest mountain on Earth, and many people have tried exploring it over the years, but no human has ever even gotten close to reaching the bottom. It's basically pitch black down there, the pressure is immense, and once you go deep enough into the ocean, gases start to form, and the pressures rise so high that you're unable to come up like you would from a normal dive, and you have to actually come up with a diving chamber for your internal pressures to regulate, because if you don't, you could literally explode from the inside, which has actually happened to real people. One of the most disturbing thoughts about the ocean for me. After hearing about this, I will never forget it. That aside though, the Mariana Trench itself is a whole other can of worms. Who knows what kind of creatures lie at its depths? Only a few have ever been found, and from what we've seen, they're quite terrifying. Ever heard of the black sea devil, or the Dumbo octopus, or maybe even the deep sea dragonfish? Yeah, the creatures found down here are just creepy. But some are also truly just fascinating and out of this world, like the ping pong tree sponge and the comb jellies. These fish and organisms just seem too alien to be found on Earth, and who knows what could be lying in its deepest depths. Underground ocean. It's been determined by scientists that there may be a vast reservoir of water hidden underneath the Earth's mantle, which is over 400 miles underneath the surface, an ancient sea floor, and a new undiscovered layer between the mantle and the core, which is definitely an interesting concept to think about. But honestly, we don't even know enough about the surface oceans at this point. Julia. This is another unexplained and mysterious sound captured in the ocean, also by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, back in 1999. The sound was extremely loud and went for almost 3 minutes. Take a listen. Most believe it to be made by a large iceberg in Antarctica. Or could it be some ancient monster at the bottom of the ocean? And could this be the same thing that made that bloop sound? Also, why is it called Julia? Does it sound like that's what's being said, or is it just a cute name for this alleged sea monster? I actually have no idea. 1968 submarine disappearances. Back in 1968, there were 4 mysterious submarine disappearances from 4 different nations, which is very strange and led to many thinking this couldn't have all been a coincidence, and instead was the work of something far more sinister. It's also suspicious because this was near the height of the Cold War, but it all started with the INS Dakar, an Israeli submarine which disappeared on January 25th, along with its 69-man crew, with its wreckage not being found until 1999. And only 2 days later, a French submarine also vanished in the Gulf of the Lion, with a crew of 45 men also missing. And this submarine wasn't even found until 2019. A Soviet ballistic missile submarine also disappeared in March, but pieces of the wreckage were found in August of that same year by Americans near Hawaii. And lastly, the USS Scorpion disappeared in May. And this one is the most shocking of all of them because this was actually carrying nuclear weapons. So what happened here? Why did they all disappear not only in the same year, but also pretty much in the first half of it? Well, the Navy actually detected some strange explosion-like sounds coming from the Scorpion after it disappeared, and when the site of the wreck was eventually found, it became radioactive due to the nuclear contents on board. Some believe bad weather was the cause of most, if not all, of these occurrences, while some believe that the US and Russian governments attacked each other's spy submarines, while some also speculate diving too quickly with these newer submarine technologies also could have caused them to sink, or possibly even caused hydrogen-triggered explosions, but whatever the case, these instances still remain quite mysterious. Coconut crabs. Again, not so much a mystery, but they do involve one coming up here in a bit, so might as well explain what they are in case you haven't heard of these, because they are the stuff of nightmares, and that's coming from the guy whose favorite food in the world is crab and lobster. So yeah, these bloodborne enemies are actually crabs that can grow up to 3 feet 3 inches in width, and are the largest terrestrial arthropod in the world. They're known as coconut crabs because they can actually crack into coconuts and eat them, but they're also known to eat small mammals and even birds. Yeah, it's terrifying. They're also hermit crabs and tend to live on land in various islands, mostly located in the Indian Ocean. And they also very likely have eaten humans, and we'll get to that a little later. Blue whale sound. So I'm not exactly sure what this is referring to, but it could be the mystery of why blue whales are no longer making the same kinds of noises or songs that they made in the past, which were so loud that they could not only be heard 500 miles away, but also were on a frequency that couldn't normally be heard by normal human ears. I don't know, it's kind of a weird situation, but some attribute this to happening due to climate change, ocean noise pollution, and possibly changing ocean populations. But again, I'm no expert on this, so I'm pretty unsure. This could also just be referring to a specific mysterious whale sound like the 52 blue, also known as the 52 Hz whale, which was a sound captured at a very unusual frequency of some sort of whale species. Bottom of the iceberg. 400-year-old shark. This is very interesting, and it's basically just what the title suggests, a 400-year-old shark, said to be the longest living vertebrate animal in the world as of 2016, although it's technically impossible to know when it was really born, and they're just making educated guesses based on ways to determine the age and longevity of these Greenland sharks. But still, the oldest sample of this kind of shark that they could find likely lived for over 392 years, possibly being born in the 1600s. Yeah, some are skeptical considering just how crazy that is. Like, this shark would have been a full-grown adult during the American Revolution. Not only that, but because they live so long, they're also one of the largest known species of sharks, growing sometimes over 20 feet long and over 2,000 to 3,000 pounds. Yonaguni Monument. The Yonaguni Monument is a well-known rock formation located off the coast of Yonaguni Island in Japan. And like a lot of other underwater formations, speculation began on if these were man-made monoliths or ruins from an ancient civilization such as Mu, a hypothetical lost continent, something similar to that of the legend of Atlantis, with some even estimating that the structures are over 10,000 years old. However, again, like a lot of these formations, it seems like this is just a natural occurrence, created of sandstones and mudstones. Or is it? Immortal jellyfish. So on a completely random note, the first time I remember hearing about this was when this kid in my Spanish class randomly told this to me in the middle of class, and I got kicked out, even though I literally said nothing, which is why I still remember this fact to this day. But random tangent aside, there really is a certain species of jellyfish called the Turritopsis doni. Bro, these alien halo type names are crazy. Anyway, they're biologically immortal, which is an insane thing to think about, meaning it doesn't age, as its cells do not die and even repair themselves. In fact, apparently this jellyfish can actually cause itself to age backwards, which is just fascinating. That doesn't mean they can't die though, that just means they don't die from aging. There are still many environmental factors, diseases, and predators which can and do kill them. Big fin squid. Now this thing is truly the stuff of nightmares. I mean, if I told you about this without photo proof, you would think this is a cryptid, but these squids are very much real, just very hard to find, and are typically only sighted deep in the sea. What's most notable, as you might notice, are its extremely long tentacle appendages, which can be over 20 feet long, which are thought to be used to scrape the ocean floor for edible organisms. Not only that, but these are the only squid species to be seen in the Hadal Zone, otherwise known as the deepest region of the ocean, between 20,000 and 36,000 feet below sea level. Just makes you wonder, if this monster's down there, what other undiscovered creepy species might be lurking there. Point Nemo. This is a location in the Pacific Ocean that is the farthest point from any land on Earth, almost 1,500 nautical miles from the nearest island, which is just a terrifying prospect. I mean, being stranded out at sea is one thing, but being that far from any civilization, or even any landmass for that matter, water for as far as the eye can see, but also for just thousands of kilometers as well. For this reason, it's also known as the oceanic pole of inaccessibility. In fact, hilariously but also scary enough, it's so far from any human life that the closest humans to you could be those aboard the International Space Station. Yeah, crazy stuff. World's oldest mammal. Scientists have discovered a fossil from the now oldest known living mammal on Earth, a small creature that might have existed 225 million years ago, which pushes back the origin of mammals by millions of years. So it seems that this creature, called the Brachyllodon, would have existed at the same time as the dinosaurs. Biblical Leviathan. Here we go, another infamous ocean cryptid. Not even really a cryptid in the standard sense. This is definitely a mythological creature though, featured in the Bible in multiple books, as a legendary sea serpent and the embodiment of chaos. And interestingly, it shares a lot of similarities with other common world serpents of mythology, like Jormungandr and Veritra. Sorry, I definitely butchered those names, but also even dragons. Vertical migration. Here's an interesting fact about ocean life. Billions, literally billions, of organisms in the ocean, including fish, but also plankton and other creatures, migrate up and down, deeper into the water, which alters the ecosystem of the ocean. Scientists are kind of unsure why there are mass vertical migrations, but there are theories, such as avoiding predators, going to surface levels for more food, or even going deeper to reproduce or avoid DNA damage from ultraviolet radiation. Heraklion. Here we have a ruined and ancient port city from ancient Egypt. But this isn't some lost civilization, this one is actually real. However, its ruins are buried in the ocean near Abu Qir Bay. But quite a few archaeological finds have come from the site. The city also first started as Thonis, or Thonis, I'm not really sure, and likely dates back to the 12th century BC. So yeah, this place is very old. Upsweep. Another infamous deep-sea sound was captured by NOAA in 1991, and is nicknamed upsweep for the long stretches of, well, upsweeps in audio which can be seen on a spectrogram of the sound. But this isn't the only time this audio was heard. Apparently this sound is heard seasonally around summertime near New Zealand and South America in the ocean, although it's thought that the sounds simply come from underwater volcanic activity. I'm assuming this is referring to possibly the strangest sound heard deep in the ocean, a sound that is similar to that of a train horn, captured in the Pacific in 1997. However, you all know the standard explanation for these sounds by now. It was an iceberg. At least that's what they think. However, the strange, steady frequency makes it sound kind of otherworldly, and of possibly a living creature more than a train, in my opinion. But still, the thought of hearing a train while in the ocean is also pretty creepy. Those two things just don't clash at all. It hits those uncanny vibes for sure, when something just absolutely does not belong anywhere near the other. The Abyss. Globster. This is a name used to describe a number of cases of an unidentified mass of organic tissue that washes up on shores across the world, first coined in the 1960s, but is also just sometimes referred to as blobs as well. However, as it turns out, most of these cases turned out to be the remnants of decaying whale carcasses, usually containing a lot of whale blubber. Although sometimes they are also from a giant squid or octopus, but some of the cases still remain unsolved. German U-boat 60-foot crocodile. Serving in the First World War, a German U-boat called the SMU-28 had a particularly strange encounter with an unknown crocodile-like creature after they sank a British steamer ship in July of 1915. As according to the boat's commander, after the British ship was shot down, another explosion erupted from the wreckage, and along with it, a giant crocodile-looking creature, which was only briefly seen before it disappeared into the water, never to be seen or identified again. Sargasso Sea's carnivorous seaweed. This is really interesting. So apparently this is an old legend that a certain type of seaweed in the Sargasso Sea is responsible for the disappearances of several crews of men in the 1800s and actually ate them, which is a terrifying thought. And honestly, at this point, with the stuff I've seen so far on this list, I wouldn't be too surprised if this was real. Okay, maybe a little bit. This area is known though for a specific type of seaweed called sargassum, although it is not known to eat people, and the legend most likely spawned from people going overboard and never returning, thinking the seaweed might have dragged them down to the ocean floor and actually ate them. Which, I mean, is almost true. No, it didn't actually eat them or anything, but the seaweed was so thick it probably stopped them from being able to swim back to the surface, causing them to drown. Montauk Monster. This is the case of a washed up animal carcass that cannot be as easily explained as the others, because first of all, this doesn't look like anything I've ever seen come out of the ocean before, and second, this is a pretty high quality image, because this didn't happen in the 1900s or something. This happened on a beach in New York in July of 2008 near the district of Montauk, hence the name the Montauk Monster, and there were many theories as to what this could be, other than that maybe this is some undiscovered monster, of course. Some thought it was some kind of huge turtle missing its shell, and others thought it was possibly a dog or a rodent, but the most likely explanation, according to experts, is that this is actually just a water-decayed raccoon that lost most of its hair, although some disagree with this theory, pointing out that its legs were too long to be that of a raccoon. Stronsay Beast. So remember the globster phenomenon? Well, this is one of the oldest known cases of it, with an unknown carcass that was said to be 55 feet in length that also lacked a tail, which was washed ashore on an island called Stronsay in Scotland after a storm in 1808. And since it was so long ago, all we have are sketches of said creature, which many believed at the time to be some sort of sea serpent or sea snake. Although nowadays, it's believed that this was simply a large shark carcass. But again, there is no real way to tell because all we have are accounts of those who saw it, which may be incorrect or even embellished. Schaefer's anglerfish. This one's just kind of a weird fish discovered in 1976 in the Caribbean Sea, but the best thing about this fish is how they walk, and yes, they actually do walk on the ocean floor with their fins. Casper octopus. Another funny looking species here, we have the Casper octopus, discovered in 2016 in the Pacific Ocean, named after Casper the Friendly Ghost for their translucent and ghostly color. These might be the cutest little guys I've ever seen. Coconut crabs ate Amelia Earhart. And here we have that infamous theory about what really happened to Amelia Earhart, and I know it sounds a little ridiculous at first glance, but hear me out. We already talked about how coconut crabs are basically Skyrim spiders in real life, and will basically eat anything, right? But first of all, Amelia Earhart was the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean, and was one of the most prominent figures in aviation at the time, and still is in the history of flight. That's why when she disappeared on July 2nd, 1937, many wondered what could have happened to her after she set off on her global flight. She took off from Lae Airfield in Papua New Guinea and never made it to her destination of Howland Island. But a grim theory about what really happened to her has since surfaced. Because in 1940, on an atoll called Nikumaroro, almost 2,000 miles from Hawaii, they found the skeletal remains of a person, which were even sent over to try and see if they really belonged to Earhart, but they sadly were somehow lost. The plane was also never found or recovered, as well as the navigator who was with her, Fred Noonan. However, this island that they found the remains at was inhabited, of course, by the killer coconut crabs, which some think could have possibly eaten most of the remains of Amelia, or possibly, on an even more disturbing note, may have eaten her alive. They even performed an experiment using a pig carcass to see how long it would take for them to devour it, and it only took about 2 weeks, with them even taking the bones back to their dens. Quite a grim and disturbing theory, and probably not true, but still interesting to look into. The Deep Depths. St. Augustine Monster. We have another globster case here, found washed ashore in 1896 on the coast of Florida in St. Augustine. It has since been dubbed the St. Augustine Monster or the Florida Monster, even though most, even at the time, simply believed it to be the remains of a giant octopus. However, this is one of the biggest cases of this phenomenon, and samples were studied many times over the years. But as it turns out, it appears this thing was actually just a mass of collagen and whale blubber from a sperm whale. Phantom Island. This is another general thing, but a pretty interesting phenomenon back when explorers were mapping out previously unexplored areas of the world, where they would sometimes mark certain islands that later when traveled to did not exist, either being misidentified, placed in the wrong locations, or deliberately falsified for whatever reason. A famous example of this would be the island of California, because in the 17th and 18th centuries on many maps for whatever reason, it was thought that California was separate from the rest of the North America continent, thinking that it was in fact a huge island. And there are many more of these cases, including a lot of famous mythological locations like Atlantis, the Isle of Demons, and more. Ningen. Sorry, I couldn't resist. But these are humanoid creatures from Japanese mythology and folklore said to be found in the Antarctic oceans. However, these aren't any old school mythological creature. No, these are very modern creations, dating back to a post from a Japanese forum called 2channel in 2002. However, since then there have been a few reported sightings, including an infamous Google Earth image from 2005 that is said to have spotted the creature, although most just believe it to have been an iceberg. Descriptions of the character vary, but it's said to have a human-like appearance, having a similar kind of face, but also strangely long limbs and a pale blue skin pigment, and are also said to be giant creatures over 60 feet long. Also, the name Ningen means something like person or human being in Japanese. Untouchable bathysphere fish. Here we have a collection of undiscovered fish species that are possibly now extinct or may not even exist, that were first observed off the coast of Bermuda in 1932 and haven't been seen since. They were first seen and drawn by a man named William Beebe, who was studying deep sea life and found them during an expedition using an early diving submersible called the bathysphere. Some of these observed fish are pretty interesting, but compared to the other things on this list, not anything to really write home about. Although it's unclear if these are now extinct or if he just misidentified these species with other fish. Flannan Isle Mystery. In the year 1900, a crew aboard a steamer called the Arctur arrived in Leith from Philadelphia, noticing that the Flannan Isle lighthouse was not operational, which is not only strange but also dangerous. And strangely, when they went to investigate it, the three-man crew that was operating it was missing, nowhere to be found. Not only that, but there were also clues that some sort of accident took place, such as the clocks being stopped and there being considerable damage to the west landing. Even huge rocks were displaced, signaling that possibly a huge storm could have taken place, but no bodies were ever recovered. People posed theories such as that they were just taken away by that huge storm, or that one man might have fallen into the sea and they were all washed away when they tried to help him, due to something like a rogue wave. But whatever the case, this still remains one of the most investigated and mysterious disappearances in Scotland's history. 4chan Sea Carpet. So I believe this refers to the 4chan black carpet urban legend, which is essentially just a very long creepypasta detailed in an X-board about a diver encountering this black carpet at the bottom of the ocean that is made up of many different small black organisms that feed on anything that comes in contact with them. Also, it's said that this thing is responsible for the bloop, but again, very likely just an urban legend. Unidentified four-tentacled jellyfish. Back in 2015, NOAA once again discovered something otherworldly, it seems, in the deep waters near Hawaii. This alien-looking jellyfish. This thing belongs in Half-Life for sure. Like, are we sure this isn't some sort of head crab or something? It was also seen on an expedition in the Gulf of Mexico in 2014, but this species has not been identified. Soya Antarctic Godzilla. Yeah, so this one's kind of funny, not gonna lie, but back in 1958, the captain of a Japanese research ship in Antarctica called the Soya claimed to see some sort of large creature at Ludzoholm Bay, one that he said resembled Godzilla, which premiered only about 4 years before this sighting in Japan, giving it that nickname Antarctic Godzilla. But when you look at drawings of what the creature was said to look like, it doesn't really resemble Godzilla at all, at least from my knowledge. Definitely an interesting cryptid though. 1997 whistle sound. Here we go, you know how it goes by now. We got another unidentified sound from the ocean, this time recorded in 1997, which some say sounds similar to a whistle, while scientists believe it is similar to those generated by volcanic activity in the area, but I'll let you decide what you think made the noise. Mariana Trench. Cosmic Sea. A cosmic ocean or sea is kind of a mythological concept featured all over the world, from ancient Greece to Judaism to Egypt to India, you name it. Most of the time involving the primordial waters, or basically some kind of body of water related to a creation story, sometimes also having to do with the global flood, which is also very common among cultures and religions. Some of these texts describe the cosmic ocean as something existing before anything else, a boundless, formless nothingness, basically personified as chaos before the creation of humanity. Eltanin antenna. Here I think is one of the most interesting finds on the seafloor, captured in an image taken by the USNS Eltanin ship in 1964. Of all the anomalies we've seen, this one just seems the most alien to me. Like, why is there an antenna looking thing at the bottom of the ocean? The bad quality certainly doesn't help, but still. Anyway, some people literally think it was some kind of antenna, while others believed it to be some sort of alien device or structure. And the real answer, while being something pretty mundane, is just still so weird. Because why is there even a sponge that exists that looks like this? Yes, apparently this is a species of carnivorous sponge. Apparently it's also similar to, or possibly the same thing as, the ping pong tree sponge, but I don't know, this artist's interpretation makes it look so much more cosmic and foreign. Like, this would be right at home in like Darkest Dungeon or something. I don't know, maybe I'm the weird one, who knows. Black Demon. What a title. So this refers to a certain ocean cryptid, a giant black shark said to be found in the Gulf of Mexico, which has since become the stuff of legends. Said to be almost 60 feet long and up to 100,000 pounds. Yes. Said to be either a great white, even though it's black, or possibly even a new undiscovered species of megalodon. They even made a movie about it. Contorted squid. I'm sure you're not surprised when I tell you that we've got another strange newly discovered species of squid that somehow can fold into itself and invert its own body, which is just like, how does this work? I just love that sea life completely defies all understanding of regular biological function. It's great, and it's also terrifying. Anyway, this was also spotted deep in the ocean in the Gulf of Mexico by NOAA, with there being some great video of this creature. Apparently they even believe this inversion tactic is something of a defense mechanism, which even the researchers admitted was quite bizarre for a squid. Sea People Invasion. So the alleged Sea People, or peoples, is a group that's said to have existed that attacked both ancient Egypt and other civilizations during the late Bronze Age. However, there isn't much evidence to back up such a group existing at all except for written Egyptian records, so it's unknown really what this group even was. There are some theories, and my favorite one is that they were actually just a group of seafaring pirates, hence why they were called Sea People, or maybe they were just a group of raiders from Europe, or were made up of several different tribes that were invading, but even modern historians don't really know for sure who they really were. Challenger Deep. Giant cannibal shark. Yeah, those words just definitely don't belong together. Basically, in the investigation of the death of a tagged 9-foot great white shark, many were wondering what could have killed such a huge creature. Had to be some massive whale or something, right? Or possibly even some unknown sea cryptid, maybe? Well, no, but something equally as scary. Apparently this shark was killed by another great white of the same species. That's right, a giant colossal great white cannibal shark. Unidentified Sagami Bay creature. The title sounds a little unsettling, but before I get into it, let me just show you the video. Yeah, so what does that look like to you? A mysterious creature, an ancient being, or just a rock? Everyone's laughing though till this rock starts moving, then it's game over. Most likely though, those things that look like eyes are probably just pieces of algae or something, or maybe it's some sort of statue, but either way, probably not any sort of living organism. Bimini Road. Bimini Road, also known as the Bimini Wall, is another interesting rock formation which can be found near an island in the Bahamas, and looks like it was once a man-made structure. Although that's likely not the case, as it was formed over thousands of years ago, but even some experts claim that the massive stone blocks were very likely cut by humans, making you wonder if this is the remnants of a lost city or even a civilization. I mean, it's called a road because it looks like the stones are evenly spaced apart in the formation of a road-like structure, complete with right angles and straight edges. Call of the Deep. The Call of the Deep is quite a fascinating phenomenon, similar to the Call of the Void and other intrusive thoughts like the feeling of wanting to jump from high places. Not because you necessarily want to, it's just a strange, uncanny, and scary intrusive feeling. Similar to that is the Call of the Deep, that gut feeling of wanting to go deeper and deeper into the ocean, even knowing that it could spell certain doom. Now, personally, I've never felt that, but I have had it from heights before. I mean, come on, everyone's had that thought, even if it was just for a second, so I get it. Apparently also though, this phenomenon is quite prominent with divers, not just because of their passion for it and wanting to go as deep as they can, but because of something called nitrogen narcosis, which can cause you not to think rationally, giving a similar feeling to that of being drunk, which is also just absolutely terrifying. Sometimes you can even get so confused that while trying to swim up to safety, you are unknowingly swimming farther and farther into the abyss. So in conclusion, I'm even more terrified of the ocean than I already was. Great. and you probably are too, so you're welcome for that, I guess. But this was definitely a very fun video to make. Hopefully you all got something out of it too. Let me know, what scares you the most about the ocean? Or does it not scare you at all? What do you think is the most interesting mystery on this list? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And what was left out? But that's been it for me. It's been me, Source Brew, and I'll catch you all in the next video. And as always, take care and peace out.